Okay, welcome back. So our last part actually, is you could say the most important, because now we know that what Plato meant by the good, or the one, or the boundless. How do we know what it means in the here and the now? So how can we live according to that? And a part of the answer was in the previous part, when we talked about this dialogue Philebus, that there is a certain proportion, a right measure we can find between, you could say, the one and the many. And we can use our wisdom to determine this right measure. Well, Plato already gave us a few hints. He showed that there are different levels of knowledge we can find to determine how to live according to the good. And we also have these 6 ingredients now, the 6 ingredients of the good life, according to his dialogue Philebus. But we can show that Plato shows us some other divisions very similar to these, and then we can have an even more clear picture if we connect these to each other. So, in another dialogue, Symposium, there is the question, what is love? And Socrates says in this dialogue that it is essentially the desire for immortality. And he describes at the end of this dialogue that he has a conversation with this woman, Diotima, which more or less initiates him to this idea of love. And she says there are 7 steps you can take to come from what is called the more outer love to finally the inner love, the love for beauty or the good itself. So here are these 7 steps, and let's start at the bottom. So she describes to Socrates, we can have the love for one beautiful body, meaning that we more or less are directed, if you think again of the love as the desire for immortality, that we are firstly directed to the survival of our own body, one body that we try to make survive in this world, and then it is expanded to 2 beautiful bodies. You expand your love to another person, and actually you can also say that you direct yourself to find immortality through reproduction. And then we can expand that for other 2 or other beautiful bodies, because you can see that what you find beautiful in one body actually can be recognized in other beautiful bodies, and eventually even in all beautiful bodies. And you can see a sort of universal beauty that can be found in everybody. And then we transcend from all beautiful bodies to beautiful souls or customs. And we can see that there is something working behind the outer appearance that is revealing a certain beauty. And then we can see that what comes from that are things like the arts, skills, certain customs, which are really the characters that give beauty to these arts. So we go from beautiful souls to the arts. And then we recognize that what is behind the arts is also knowledge, are certain sciences. The knowledge that is necessary to create beauty. And then we go from the sciences to the one science, the science of sciences, which is described as the science that deals with the beautiful itself. In other words, philosophy, the science of sciences, which according to Blavatsky can also be translated not only as the love for wisdom, but also as the wisdom of love, and the knowledge of the highest love, the law of laws or compassion. And then we can go from the one science to seeing the beauty or the good in itself, in its essence, the more or less mystical religious phase of becoming one with the good itself. So you could say that this also shows the process of how the many becomes again that from which the many came from itself, and the one itself. Now if we put the 7 forms of constitution from the dialogue Statesman next to this, we can see a direct resemblance to these forms of love. Also from the bottom of the top, we can see 3 forms of state in which people do not follow the law, they disobey or violate the law. First led by one person, a tyrant, then a small group, the oligarchy, and then by all, in which you have a democracy in which people violate the law. You can compare this with the forms of love with also for one body, a group of bodies, and then all bodies. Also in the lower levels with an outer orientation. And then we come to forms of government actually more or less symmetrical to these, to the lower 3, in which everyone obeys the laws, having a just democracy. Then with a small group that is abiding the law, we have aristocracy, and then one person, a king, abiding the law as the highest form in which there is a law. And in addition, you have a constitution when there is a leader, whereby the group and the wise leader are united in such a way that there isn't any need anymore even for laws. Everyone abides the law with a capital L, you might say, or the laws of nature. Now, if we compare these different divisions that Plato gives us in different dialogues, and the 6 ingredients of the good life in Philebus, which clearly correspond to the first 6 of the 7 levels of law from Symposium, which are in turn linked to the 7 forms of state in Statesman. And then we also had the different parts in the state corresponding to different virtues. Well, if we place these next to each other, you could more or less see the following resulting. And by combining all these schemes, we can distinguish 7 levels representing really states within ourselves. States which are closer or less close to the good life, you might say. And you can see that we go from a more outer direction to a more inner direction. First from one to many, then from many to one, but then on an inner level. And we will discuss them now from bottom to top, from the least good to the best life, you could say. And look at the indications that Plato gave us to recognize them in our own lives. We will give some examples for each level. Things that Plato described, but also how we can recognize these levels within ourselves, and also show you how to ascend then to a higher level. So starting by the lowest, the state or the level of the tyrant, unconsciousless, with unlimited desire, mainly directed to pleasure of the body. And in the state, Plato describes the tyrant as an addict. Someone that is dominated by a lust for very fleeting external phenomena that goes from impulse to impulse, from one kick to another, one party to another. And, that leads to a very turbulent life, for sure, because also his longings follow in ever shorter cycles. Because his desire is from the type of the most transient. Desire for outer things, for, well, certain hunger, desire for certain sensations, which are really short of cycle. But actually, he chases them to fill the emptiness in his soul. Plato describes that he's like a leaking soul, cannot hold what he gathers. And he sometimes indeed enjoys great pleasure, but doesn't realize that it only seems so great because it always is accompanied by the greatest pain. To fulfill the emptiness he really has in his soul. And you could see him being dominated actually by very selfish thought, seeking everything outside of himself, blaming everyone else, more or less losing his self-confidence, his trust in others and also in society, and at some point that even his conscience can no longer penetrate. Well, we can recognize this tyrant also in ourselves, when we also are addicted to a certain outwardly directed thought, a certain obsession, but you could also say that fanaticism is also a form of tyranny, that we can be so engrossed in a certain thought that we are no longer even aware of our surroundings, and just as the tyrant describes Plato, no longer ashamed to publicly pursue his pleasures and desires, we are totally captivated by this thought and forget about the people around us. Well, for most people, such an experience or state of mind is luckily short-lived, and a way to ascend this is to move out of that circle, that whirlwind, by doing something for someone else. And this way you give your life meaning again. It's not only turning around you. You see this, for instance, in these successful projects when they make addicts, give them the care of an animal, and then you see that they have something they can live for, something that shifts their focus to something else, that is no longer the tyrant in them that demands everything. He's no longer selfish, has a different focus, something else to live for and to give it attention, and therefore he has no identification anymore with this addictive thought. Now the oligarch, the next level is, says Plato, he's dominated by the greedy form of desire. So next, also like the tyrant, he evades his responsibility and also his conscience, but with the oligarch, unlike the tyrant, it still gnaws at him, because he really knows better. He is not so obsessed that he is unscrupulous. He still suffers from feelings of regret and of guilt. And just because of that, he tries to escape it and seduces himself to, by fleeting into emotional thoughts or impulsive actions, but he prefers that to keep it to himself and does it only in secret. And where the tyrant chases after the more physical, external forms of pleasure, the oligarch is chasing the mixture of pleasure and pain you can find in the soul. So more feelings of revenge, for example, or fear, or lamentation, or jealousy, and so on. We can recognize this when we also watch comedies or tragedies, says Plato. Laughing at someone who exaggerates their feelings to the point of ridicule. Or in a tragedy, we are captivated by the suffering of someone else. And it is precisely this realization that others are also in the same boat as we are, that enables us to detach ourselves from the oligarch in us. We can see that there are many, many more fellow sufferers, and that we don't have to feel so sorry for ourselves, because actually it is a common feeling, and that it is more about learning from these dramatic situations, seeing through these phenomena, seeing also their comedy, putting them into perspective, and trying to get back into harmony or come clean with them. So the next form is the form of the Democrats. We actually will treat these two types of Democrats, the one that abide the law or don't, at the same time. Because actually Plato also describes that the Democrat is the one that doesn't want to make a final choice. He's so fond of his freedom, and also thinks that everything should be possible, which he calls tolerant, that he also has to constantly go back and forth, oscillating between, you could say, appearance and reality. Goes from one opinion to another, and is, as a result of that, more or less directionless in life. And I think it's a situation we also can really recognize easily in our democracies. It's a state of mind also in which all thoughts are allowed, very chaotic, many fleeting thoughts with a short attention span that the Democrat has. And it's a risky state of mind, Plato says, because there is a constant temptation to be led downwards to the path of tyranny. And a way to ascend from that level is to recognize that all these external things, things that are desire for certain possessions, physical beauty, etc., that these are based on illusions, and that we can rise above this desire by exchanging an external orientation for an internal orientation towards the arts and the sciences, and the pure pleasure of enjoying, for instance, music, as examples that Plato gave. And we can also then develop this virtue of temperance, this self-control, by feeding on this inner knowledge, and learning also to be patient, and also to find peace. Not by fighting this desire aspect in ourselves, but trying to ennoble it. And having that means that the desire for outward things, also for status or possession, or for enjoyment or for pleasure, when we try to resist it, we actually are making it more difficult for ourselves, because then we give attention to it. And on the other hand, if we are concerned with the good of the whole, more inner direction, virtuous life, with pleasure as a result, rather than an end in itself, then we can far more easily transcend that state. You can also recognize this in the Greek story of Hercules at the crossroads, with two goddesses showing him two ways. Left, the noble goddess of virtue, who points up the steep, arduous path, climbing up, or to the right, the lush and scantily clad goddess of lust or pleasure, who points out the easy path where all your wishes are fulfilled. And note also the details in this picture. To the right, you see below the mask of a person, and to the left also someone who writes in the book all the thoughts and actions that are done in either these ways. You could say it's an important choice between the more selfish or altruistic motives in ourselves. Also depending on the way we identify, either with the temporary personality and the mask, or with, well, what is working behind the inner soul that tries to forget his outer personality and, tries to follow the path of virtue. And at this state of the Democrat, we also then see that we need courage to listen to our conscience and to let go of all the external things. And then we come to the level of the aristocrat. The aristocrat, which has this courageous life, is very conscientious, follows reason, follows science, also recognizes the importance of cooperation, has many friends, works in a group, is courageous but not too self-confident, and does not cause discord, knows also his limits, but is also not too cowardly to take action against others if necessary, even if these measures or messages that he has to convey are not popular at that time. And we can transcend this aristocrat in ourselves if we recognize that we need knowledge that knowledge brings us courage, and that science leads to questions that can be solved not only with external knowledge but only with wisdom. And then we get to the level of the king that tries to translate the idea of oneness to all others, who tries to find harmony, the right proportion also in the decisions about how to live life, ready to take responsibility, wise, dutiful, studies the one science, philosophy, to find the right proportion, and also knows that life and knowledge must be put in relation to each other, and knows that someone really doesn't know without also living it, and also that one does not really live without having the necessary knowledge, and try to examine this life, and to find out what is the good way of living. As Socrates said, a life, the unexamined life is not worth living, also sees that he needs the necessary knowledge. Well, we can even continue to grow further from this level of the king to the level of the philosopher-ruler or philosopher-king. When we grow through the consistent application of universal principles, these universal propositions, and get to know the most universal by becoming it, by trying to live these ideas, these universal ideas. And that is the level of the philosopher-ruler, who really lives the one, you could say, lives the good, is righteous, sees beauty in his essence, and always the right measure, lives according to the right measure. He leaves nothing undone, always does his duty, but moves with the flow of nature, creates no turbulence, and this means that it doesn't mean that it has to be a guiding figure, actually quite the contrary. A person can even be socially at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak, but through his thinking, through his spiritual atmosphere, he still exerts a great influence over his environment. These philosopher-rulers will never impose their ideas. If the environment does not recognize them, this can mean that they will even be known in their time. For example, Lao Tse was hardly known in his time, or also Ammonius Saccas, who was just a worker at the border in Alexandria, on the low at the bottom of the ladder socially, but still having a lot of influence by his ideas. We can recognize these king philosophers, these philosopher-rulers within ourselves when we are sometimes in a state of flow, and we are forgetting ourselves, doing exactly that what is necessary without being so much aware of it. And then it seems as if we are more or less rising above ourselves in that moment, and we are more or less like a sort of instrument to something higher. And unfortunately, still rare experiences in the average lives, but we still can get a hint of it. Well, these are of course not sort of linear steps. We can see that we are, one time we more or less identify with the Democrat, the other identify with the king or even the tyrant. But we can discover that with these divisions that there is a certain proportion, and this insight can help us to steer also ourselves consciously towards a certain end. So are we there then? Well, no, because that is what the following Plato says about the good. He says in the intelligible place, the idea of the good is the last object of vision and is scarcely to be seen. But if it be seen, we must collect by reasoning that it is the cause to all of everything right and beautiful, generating in the visible place light and its lord the sun. And in the intelligible place, it is itself the Lord, producing truth and intellect. And this must be beheld by him who is to act wisely, either privately or in public. Well, and as we learned, that Plato said that the good is infinite, boundless, that we can also understand more and more of it, learn more about it, learn to live by it. That means that we can always grow and always learn better to play along with this eternal dynamic harmony, you could say, of all beings trying to express this good, and actually creating this outer world with all its phenomena and cycles we can recognize. Well, this also explains, you could say, the open end in Philebus. The good is never reached. And you could say that Plato's aim is really to have ourselves ask this question again and again: what is the good life? How do I live the good? And that is that makes us continuously search for the right proportion, the right measure to find this good life. So summarizing, we could say Plato shows us first what is and how to know what is, and that there is oneness, and that by the Platonic method, going from the universals to the particulars, back to the universals, we can get more and more knowledge about this oneness, can also recognize different levels within ourselves with all these different divisions he makes in different dialogues, but also that, to really know is to live something, and only if we live something we can really know something. That true knowledge equals virtue, but also that the unexamined life is not worth living. So you could say the good life is this cycle of, gaining true knowledge by continuously examining life, but also vice versa, living according to what we identified as best, and keep searching for this good life. Okay, thank you. Let's pause for a moment. Okay, we will end with the Gayatri from the Rig Veda. A call to the highest part in ourselves, here exemplified with the golden sun. O thou golden sun of most excellent splendor, illumine our hearts and fill our minds, so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity which is the heart of the universe, may see the pathway before our feet and tread it to those distant goals of perfection, stimulated by thine own radiant light. Thanks for your attention. Next month, Herman Vermeulen will present the lecture with the theme Mental Epidemics. I think very topical in this time. I also would like to point out that our course Thinking Differently will start the 22nd of November on Sunday, 7:30 Central European Time, I have to say, CET. So you can look that up. We think it is a good time for quite some parts of the world to still join that course. I can really recommend that. Also for everyone that is interested in Platonic thinking, recommend it a lot. So there is still a room, so you can apply through our website for that. And if you want to support our lectures and other activities, you can also donate at our website. There's a button at the right top of the website. But anyway, you are always welcome to follow our activities. So thank you for your attention again, and we hope to see you next month.